The skies above Virellon burned. The once tranquil avian homeworld of the Virelli, a species known for their pacifism and intricate sky architecture, was now a battlefield. Black smoke coiled from shattered cities, and the melodic songs of the wind were drowned beneath the thundering advance of the Karnak Syndicate, ruthless warlords infamous across the galaxy for enslaving entire populations and raising cultures that resisted. Orbiting above, a ring of Karnak's dreadnoughts blockaded. Escape routes. Cities fell one by one, their resistance feeble and symbolic. Virellon had never prepared for war. Their kind had always relied on the Galactic Confederation to maintain peace, a collective that promised security in exchange for obedience and diplomatic neutrality. But this time, the Confederation remained silent. Virelli ambassadors pleaded at the Confederation's Central Hall. Emergency sessions were convened. Delegates from dozens of species expressed sympathy. Some even condemned the Karnaks. But action? None. Fear paralyzed them. The Karnaks controlled fringe trade routes, bribed Confederation officials, and boasted fleets that outgunned many minor worlds. To intervene would be to invite retaliation. And so, Virellon was quietly abandoned. In the planetary command sanctum, Envoy Shiran Tova, feathers singed and eyes dim with exhaustion, watched her species teeter on extinction. Her advisors begged her to accept surrender terms. But Shiran knew what surrender to the Karnaks meant: mass executions, slave labor, and cultural erasure. She looked at the ancient symbols of unity etched into the walls and made a decision that would alter the fate of the galaxy. She activated a restricted channel, one outlawed by Confederation mandate. It bore only a warning: unauthorized contact, Deathworlders signal pathway, Earth. The message she sent was simple: we are dying. The Confederation has forsaken us. To the Deathworlders of Earth, if you hear this, we beg for your wrath. On the other side of the galaxy, the Earth-based Terran Defense Corps received the transmission. Humanity had not been heard from in decades. After the Helix Purge, where Terran Black Ops forces wiped out an entire pirate empire and destabilized 3 war economies in a week, the Confederation had moved swiftly to sanction and isolate Earth. Humans had been branded too dangerous, too aggressive, too unpredictable. Earth was placed under diplomatic quarantine. No one was to contact the Deathworlders. No one dared. But humans remembered. In a subterranean command center beneath what was once New Santiago, a silent alarm pulsed red. Officers gathered. Tactical AIs parsed the message. The room grew cold. Then came the voice of Admiral Nira Voss, Warden of the Wastelands, presumed retired. She viewed the Virelli footage: burning skies, desperate families, orbital executions. She stood before the display, expression unreadable, then uttered only 4 words. They asked, "We go." Across the Terran expanse, black-armored ships stirred. Engines lit. AI war cores were awakened. Human soldiers prepped not for rescue, but for retribution. Not aid, but annihilation. The galaxy had forgotten what happened when you invited a Deathworlder to war. They were about to remember. The signal had been received, and the decision made. Across Earth's sealed military grid, protocols long thought, dormant, flared to life. Emergency command uplinks reactivated. Tactical AI systems previously mothballed under Confederation sanctions began recalibrating orbital targeting solutions with cold precision. Earth, the infamous Death World, was no longer silent. At the heart of it all stood Admiral Nira Voss. Her name still whispered in parts of the galaxy where fear lingered from the Helix Purge. Though officially retired, she had never truly left command. Voss had earned her reputation in campaigns where even allied species flinched at the brutality of Earth's efficiency. To her, war wasn't a dance of diplomacy. It was a fire to be controlled, aimed, and unleashed. Now, with the Virelli plea echoing in her ears, Voss stepped into the war room beneath Fort Arclight, buried a kilometer beneath the Andes. Around her stood officers of the Terran Defense Corps, all veterans of forgotten wars, all aware of what answering this signal would mean. "This isn't peacekeeping," said Vice Marshal Lennox, scanning the readouts from Virelon. "This is extermination. The Karniks won't back down." "Good," Voss replied. "Neither will we." With a flick of her neural implant, she activated Directive 13, a classified mobilization reserved for existential threats. But this wasn't Earth's threat. This was a choice, a statement. The Deathworlders were not rescuers. They were reminders. Across Earth's orbital rings and hidden asteroid bases, Task Force Obsidian began forming. It wasn't a typical fleet. It was a weapon. The force was comprised of stealth warships, gravitic artillery cruisers, dreadnought carriers, and hunter-killer drone swarms, all crewed by the best warriors Earth had left in the shadows. They weren't uniformed ambassadors of peace. These were soldiers bred on a planet where everything tried to kill them, from wildlife to climate to each other. Their motto rang loud in the briefing halls: "We don't send help. We end threats." Among them was Colonel Dag Rourke, leader of the ground assault division known as the Ash Talons, a unit so feared during the Purge Wars that entire systems had surrendered at their name alone. When asked by a junior officer why they were deploying for someone else's war, Rourke simply said, "We're not doing this for the Virelli. We're doing it to remind the galaxy that monsters still live on Earth." Meanwhile, the Galactic Confederation watched in mounting horror. Long-range sensor networks detected Earth's sudden activity. The Confederation Council convened an emergency session, panicked that the humans were mobilizing. Many shouted to intercept. Others whispered fears that humanity might seize territory or use the crisis to break its isolation. But it was already too late. Task Force Obsidian slipped through dark space corridors only known to Earth's deep-range navigators. Their ships vanished from scanners, their signatures masked, their trajectory unknown. To the Confederation, this was the beginning of another crisis. To Earth, this was just another unfinished war. And in the cold vacuum between stars, a transmission left Earth's flagship, the TDS Revenant, to the Karniks, occupying Virelon. "You were warned, you ignored it. This is not a rescue, this is your reckoning." The Karnik syndicate had grown overconfident. In orbit above Virelon, their armada loomed like a swarm of metal beasts, cannons idle, confident in their supremacy. They had conquered dozens of systems with impunity, believing no force dared oppose them, certainly not the neutered Galactic Confederation, whose leaders folded faster than their diplomats could draft apologies. But they had never faced Earth. Not truly. Space around Virelon shimmered, subtle distortions rippling like oil on water. Then came the breach. One moment, the void was quiet. The next, Task Force Obsidian tore from dark space in perfect formation, hundreds of Terran warships materializing without warning or declaration. No emissaries, no translators, no theatrics. The TDS Revenant, Earth's flagship dreadnought, led the charge. Coated in radar-absorbing alloys and lined with angular armor like the carapace of a deep-sea predator, it exuded menace. Its hull bore no flags, no symbols, just a single phrase etched near the prow in a dozen dead languages. "We came to end you." The Karniks scrambled. Alarms rang. Fighters launched. Their fleet attempted to maneuver, but Task Force Obsidian didn't wait. The Revenant fired first. From its belly launched a hypervelocity kinetic lance. No energy, no radiation, just raw, accelerated tungsten. It punched through the lead Karnik's dreadnought as though it were paper, exiting through the engine core in a spray of molten debris. The enemy ship detonated seconds later, consumed by its ruptured reactors. Panic erupted. The Terrans moved with terrifying precision. Swarms of autonomous Wraith drones darted forward, weaving through Karnik's defenses, sabotaging engines, slicing through hulls with nanothermal claws. Grav cannon barrages from Earth's artillery cruisers bent space-time around the Karnik's formations, distorting fields and tearing apart escort ships. Inside the Karnik's command vessel, Warlord Threxos watched his fleet crumble in stunned disbelief. "Who are they?" he demanded. An aide stammered. "Unknown. No Confederation ID. Their IFF tags read, Deathworld origin. Earth." Threxos's 4 hearts skipped a beat. That name still carried weight. Whispers of Earth's violence, of the Helix Purge and the Varnak collapse had become bedtime horror tales for alien children. Yet they'd believed the humans were gone, contained, but they weren't gone. They'd simply been waiting. Terran dropships launched from orbit, breaching atmosphere like meteor storms. Reinforced with ablative armor and guided by combat AIs, the pod slammed into the planet's surface with pinpoint accuracy. From each one emerged ash talons in jet-black exoframes, 2 meters tall, with reinforced plating, plasma claws, and emotionless helmets. Their orders: neutralize all Karniks. No prisoners. The Karniks garrison on Virelon attempted to regroup. They never had the chance. Terran infantry tore through bunkers, dismantled mechanized columns with EMP webs, and deployed sonic hammers that turned solid rock to shrapnel. From orbit, Admiral Voss broadcast a single message on all Karniks frequencies. "We received a request for aid. You are the obstacle. Elimination in progress." On the surface, Virelli civilians emerged from hiding, beaks trembling as they witnessed the arrival of a force unlike anything they'd imagined. The Terrans did not pause to accept thanks. They moved like wraiths, silent, efficient, unstoppable. The skies above Virelon burned again, but this time it was not the flames of conquest. It was the fire of judgment. The skies over Virelon still shimmered from residual plasma fire as the last Karnik's resistance crumbled. In just under 30 hours, Task Force Obsidian had dismantled an armada, obliterated a planetary occupation force, and secured the planet without appealing to a single diplomatic channel. No negotiations, no appeals for surrender, only execution of a singular, unwavering directive: eliminate the threat. But while Virelon exhaled its first breath of freedom, the Galactic Confederation was suffocating. In the High Council chambers of Zarva Prime, delegates from over 100 member species gathered in an emergency convocation. Tension crackled in the air like static. Streams of battlefield footage from Virelon played across the central holoscreen, unfiltered, raw, and horrifying. They saw Karnik ships torn apart mid-maneuver. They saw ground troops atomized before they could fire. They saw humans, tall, armored monsters, moving through combat zones with inhuman efficiency, speaking no words, leaving no survivors. Some delegates sat in silence. Others broke into furious arguments. They violated interstellar law. Earth was sanctioned, quarantined. How did they build that fleet? "They didn't invade a sovereign world," said Counselor Viel Throne of the Iridari. "They responded to a distress call, one we ignored." "But they didn't respond," snapped a Drolaxan ambassador. "They retaliated. They erased a war fleet in hours. Who will they turn on next?" That question hung heavy. Back when Earth had been accepted into the Confederation, it was seen as a curiosity, primitive, aggressive, but useful. That illusion had shattered during the Helix Purge. Humanity had been exiled, not out of punishment, but out of fear. And now, they had returned, not seeking approval, not asking for reintegration. They didn't want back in. They wanted the galaxy to remember. In a confidential side chamber, the Confederation's Defense Consortium convened. Surveillance analysts reviewed the Terran arsenal, hyperspace interdiction systems, anti-fleet AI-controlled guns, bioadaptive ground troops immune to conventional toxins, cloaked suborbital platforms capable of firing from atmospheric blind spots. "They've grown stronger in isolation," said Director Silas of the Varnak Corps. "More advanced, more precise." A silence followed, broken by the quiet admission of Counselor Lientra. "We thought they'd fade away. But the Deathworlders do not wither. They wait, they prepare, and when they rise, they do not come to rebuild. They come to finish what others fear to begin." Fear turned into policy discussion. Should the Confederation confront Earth, sanction them again, attempt open diplomacy? Before a consensus could form, a single encrypted transmission arrived, addressed to the Confederation Council. It was from Admiral Nira Voss. Her face appeared, calm, unreadable, backlit by the war-torn skies of Virelon. She spoke clearly. You left Virelon to die. We did not. If you consider that a threat, perhaps you've forgotten what peace costs. Earth remembers. We don't want your seat. We don't want your permission. We came because someone needed us, and no one else dared. Cross us and you'll meet our silence. Threaten us and you'll meet our fleet. Then the screen cut to black. And in that darkness, the galaxy finally understood. Earth had not returned to rejoin the galaxy. They had returned to remind it why they were cast out in the first place. The battlefield was silent now. Karnak's vessels drifted in orbit like shattered bones, their wreckage caught in Virelon's gravity well. On the surface, blackened craters and vaporized strongholds marked where the invaders had once stood. The sky, once scorched with fire, now began to clear. The storm had passed, but the humans hadn't left. Colonel Dag Rourke stood at the edge of the Virelli capital's shattered command center, his black exo-armor streaked with soot and nanoplasma residue. Around him, members of the Ash Talons moved with practiced calm, securing final zones, setting up temporary outposts, and distributing emergency supplies. The Virelli, tall, feather-crested avians, watched the Terrans with a mixture of reverence and awe. These weren't liberators. They weren't even saviors. They were something older, something primal. They didn't rescue. They removed threats. They didn't pause to be thanked. They moved like executioners whose job was never glory, only finality. A young Virelli leader, Erikal, approached Rourke. She wore ceremonial bindings that had once marked her as a political envoy, but now they were singed, her feathers ragged, from weeks of hiding and fear. Still, she straightened her spine and spoke. You came when no one else did. You destroyed them. Why? You owe us nothing. Rourke glanced at her, voice low and grave. Because you asked. She blinked. That's it? He nodded once. No one should beg and be met with silence. We heard. We answered. That simple answer rippled through Virelon like a quake. Songs were composed in real time by Virelli musicians, elegies of the Deathworlders who walked through fire to answer a call no one else dared to touch. Across their shattered cities, humans worked alongside locals, not as conquerors, not as commanders, but as professionals finishing the job. Back in orbit, aboard the TDS Revenant, Admiral Nira Voss monitored the strategic data. The Karnak's forces were eliminated. Civilian casualties had been minimal. Objectives achieved, and yet she knew it wasn't over because their message had spread. In neighboring systems, Confederation allies, rattled by Earth's reemergence, tightened their borders. Some issued public condemnations, others quietly, requested Terran consultations not out of alliance but from growing unspoken fear. And fear was something Earth understood intimately. It was the oldest language in the universe, and humans spoke it fluently. Meanwhile, in hidden Terran war rooms, other admirals, operatives, and strategists reviewed what had been tested and what had succeeded. Obsidian-class weaponry had performed, above expectations. Cloaked gravships had bypassed all known detection systems. Bio-enhanced infantry had taken near-zero losses, but above all, they analyzed one factor with the greatest care: the reaction. Because this wasn't just about Virelon. This had been a signal. To Earth's enemies, it said, we are watching. To Earth's allies, it said, we are not gone. To those who remained neutral, it said, choose wisely. On Virelon, the final Karnak's hideouts were being reduced to dust, and Earth's forces began preparation for extraction. The humans left no statues, no banners, no symbols, just results, and a phrase etched into the ashes of a Karnak's command tower, burned by orbital laser. You called for aid. We brought the end. In the weeks following the liberation of Virelon, the galaxy was no longer the same. The name Earth now echoed in war councils, diplomatic assemblies, and military simulations. Once dismissed as a quarantined backwater of aggressive primitives, humanity had re-entered the stage of galactic affairs, not with a press conference or a treaty, but with the annihilation of a battle-hardened armada, and they hadn't asked permission. Across thousands of star systems, stories spread, some exaggerated, others understated. In the markets of Chrysalux, traders whispered that the Deathworlders could phase through walls. On the moons of Darun, scholars debated the tactical brilliance of Task Force Obsidian. And in shadowy bunkers far from starlight, warlords updated their invasion models to include one terrifying new variable, Terran retaliation. But Earth didn't issue ultimatums. No press release followed the Virelon strike. No posturing. No recruitment drive. Their silence became louder than any threat. On Virelon, the last Terran shuttles lifted off under the twin suns, leaving behind cleared battlefields, rebuilt, comms towers, and caches of humanitarian supplies with no strings attached. Colonel Rourke's departing words to the Virelli governor were simple. If they come back, call again. We don't forget those who keep their word. The Virelli carved those words in stone. Far above, aboard the TDS Revenant, Admiral Naira, Voss stared at the stars in the command deck's observation dome. She wasn't smiling, she never did. Victory was not celebration. It was maintenance of peace through force, and peace, she knew, was fragile in a galaxy that respected only power. Behind her, an AI avatar materialized. Its form resembled a featureless silver figure wrapped in holographic shadows. It spoke with a synthesized tone. Confederation chatter indicates 24 species have reopened their files on Earth. Some want treaties. Others are preparing defenses. Voss didn't turn. Let them prepare. Let them remember. There was a pause before the AI continued. Our intervention has changed perception. Earth is no longer seen as exiled. It's seen as a deterrent, a last resort. She finally replied, voice calm but edged with steel. That's all we ever needed to be. She knew Earth had no ambitions of empire, no hunger for territory, no need to dominate. But if the galaxy continued to ignore the desperate, exploit the weak, and abandon the innocent, then humans would answer. They weren't saviors, they were consequences. Back on Earth, memorials were quiet. The names of the 3 Terran soldiers lost during the Virelon strike were added to the wall of silence at Terra Base Orion. No grand parades, no speeches, just their names etched in obsidian and the respect of a civilization that had chosen vigilance over vanity. From that moment forward, distress beacons across the stars changed in tone. They no longer pleaded for help from the Confederation. They carried 4 coded words. If Earth still listens. And deep in the Terran defense grid, a simple light would blink. A signal. A whisper. And if the call was true, and the need real, then once again, the Deathworlders would rise. Not to conquer, not to rule, but to remind the stars. There are forces worse than monsters. There are those who keep their promises, and when they arrive they bring annihilation,